Podcast Season 2 with Matt and Al. Education, policy, innovation, and ideas.
Morning all. Grateful to have Kaz here this morning. Kaz, I was trying to work out an introduction for you, and there's too many things, whether it's PhD, Teacher of the Year, founder of events that tens of thousands benefit from. And I think the biggest thing I can say about you is that you're a brilliant person and that you're constantly trying to change things as well. You don't accept things how they are.
Oh, that's very sweet. I find it very awkward whenever like somebody says to me, like, give your introduction. I'm like, this is a complicated question. It's too long.
Lots of hats.
To pass.
I thought I'd start with AI really, because I know what you've been doing. I don't understand. I'm not clever enough to understand what you've been doing for your PhD in AI, but we've used it and we've been involved with it. But if, in your own words, what is the main thing or the main problem that you're trying to solve or help schools solve and address with the work that you've done with your drive framework, for example, as part of the PhD?
Yeah, the main problem I'm trying to solve with that is that a lot of the issues regarding how we use digital technology are very kind of huge and fragmented, and there's lots of different things, and they've become, a lot of the frameworks themselves are very complex. And you kind of can be like, oh, let's look at assessment, let's look at infrastructure, let's look at this, let's look at that. What I wanted to do with mine was map out whole school systems and map out with experts and map out with teachers what was actually going on, and then use a system thinking, an AI kind of method approach, a new approach that I've had to design now, to basically be able to target within an individual school to say, this is the bit that you could concentrate on that would give you some of the best impacts, and then give them roadmaps through that, so that it wasn't, normally when you look at kind of a digital readiness indexes, they're kind of like a framework, and I've got a nice diagram for everybody, but they're normally kind of like this bit, this bit, this bit, this bit, or the kind of, you see them and maybe you've got a couple of bits, that are like on, let's look at maybe assessment, but nobody tells you what priority order you should do any of this in, or what are the kind of fundamental steps, or what are the things that in your context would make a massive difference. So what I wanted to do was go, here's what they look like. Let's model out literally down to the fine detail, 50 experts modeling the system. What are the kind of challenges we've got? What are the barriers? What hinders what feedback loops are in what? And I think that's valuable data for us to have, so that you can kind of understand that, you could change exactly something in how you safeguard, say, and how you safeguard in technology, but there's knock-on impacts from that to other areas. And we intrinsically know that as teachers. We know that as experts, all digital experts will know, oh, if you improve your infrastructure, you might get benefits here. Or if you improve your safeguarding, you'll probably get benefits there. But what we've not done is map out any of those relationships, properly, thoroughly. So
can we talk fuzzy, Caroline?
Yes.
How that cognitive
fuzzy math worked.
Well, it's about taking data and putting it in context with those links and how they're interacted and what but I think for some people, the biggest challenge is how do you bring all that data to life and make it something that's actually interpretable and usable? And so I'm prompting on something I know is one of the parts of your research.
Yeah. I mean, I used what's called fuzzy logic. Normally, you get very much kind of black and white answers with data. We get our data, it's 25% of this, 10% of that. That's the data. That's the answers we know. And most data, and most of the data that we use actually in machine learning and systems, is very much Bayesian data. It's straightforward. Mine uses what's called fuzzy logic, which is the answers somewhere in between these two things. It's a boundary. So it's from 1 to 0, with 0 being it's absolutely dire and 1 being it's absolutely excellent. You bound it somewhere in there. So you could say, well, I think our infrastructure is probably about a 5 or a 6. And most people can kind of gauge where they think it is, or where they feel that position is. But when you get enough people doing that, you can start to see patterns within that kind of data, so you can see it. So it's a soft computing method, mine. It's designed for expertise. So it's not generalized kind of modeling data where you get lots of data, you pile it all and you let a computer work it out. FCM systems work on the expertise of the experts. So they work specifically on them. Normally you have about like 8 to 10 experts. I chose to have like 50. So I was over ambitious with my model. But it gave a real range, because then I could ask SNDs, experts, people in APs, people in secondaries, people at trust levels, people at policy levels, people at every single level, to map out everything that they knew and what they thought all those relationships
And
were.
isn't that better than having the algorithm that sets one hard value based on your interpretation?
Yes, I think it is. I think you probably see more of those type of models coming forwards than in what's called explainable AI. AI where you can drill down and see the exact relationship of where that data's come from. And that's a better method than using black box AI, where a lot of the decisions are made by algorithm based on probabilities. You know,
I
I
think
was
that
trying to
sounds
think.
crazy, Caroline. Why would we want transparent AI and see where
I
the data
know,
comes?
I mean,
I mean, you're just going too far into the crazy area now.
and we were both at the kind of like the AI event, and I kind of it was really good. It was nice to see so many educators involved with it. But I realized when I was at it, I was really sold with Laura Knight's talk, because it touched on a few technical issues. But I realized I probably need to start talking about the technicalities a bit more of how kind of AI works. So I thought I wrote like a hardcore note for myself today for you. And I was like, what would I say were some of the technical issues, the hardcore ones that maybe you need to think about, or we should think about? And I realized there's quite probably a few things people haven't really thought about with things like generative models or general AI that you only get when you're in the kind of engineering department in the technical part. So I figured I'd give you a few today. So there's a couple that I'd say we probably need to talk about from a technical perspective of how AI actually works. So a couple of them, when you're using things like generative models, okay, they are, most of us understand now, predicting the next word, but probably maybe we don't realize, a lot of us, that they're predicting them from tokenization. So they split them into the tokens and they predict them for them. And actually, the tokenization first one, it actually only works one way. It's directional tokenization. So if you use the word like Paris is the capital of France, it will understand that, because normally it reads it that way. But if you put it the opposite way around and say France, or Paris is the capital of France, or France is in Paris, if you reverse it, it's called the reversal curse. Actually, it generally doesn't notice it. Or if you tokenize it into 2 words, say the famous one is strawberry. I did it a couple of days ago and put it up just to annoy everybody again. It's tokenized into 2 words. One is straw and one is berry. So if you ask it how many R's are in strawberry, it'll tell you 2, because it looks at it separately. Now that has kind of implications in how things are put together, and specifically in things called ODD, out of domain distribution. So most of the data is trained on English language, English people in, highly westernized countries. So when you have outer distribution, we are giving that distribution then to people in the global south, kids with terrible syntax, neurodivergent people who don't necessarily type or communicate in the same way. So if you have that tokenization happening, it tends to happen on English words really good. But if you use it on things like somebody speaking, Hindu or languages that are not easily tokenized, then it can be very different. You can have a different experience with a generative AI depending on the language you speak. So
Do you see that linking in with how they're moving to some of the token-free architectures for
yeah,
NLP now?
I do.
Byte by
So-
byte instead.
Yeah. And that's what you do. You get it linked down into, that the byte, doing it by byte. And that's quite computationally expensive. So it's a little slower, but it works a lot better than just tokenization in general. So there are like a few issues that you could have with it. I mean, you've also got the issues of things like chain of thought reasoning. So term pin, if you go look at Mokoll's Song, or Lehman did a paper on this in 2023. We assume that when it predicts something, it's worked it out. A lot of people think that. It hasn't worked it out. It's gone and found the probability of this being the answer. And then what it's done is it's gave you that answer. And then when you say to it, show me your workings out, it post hoc produces a working out for the answer. So it's not doing it that way around. It's showing you what the probable answer might be. So that's called the chain of theory reasoning problem. So that's another issue, especially for asking kids to help it work it out. The reasoning might not be the answer. So that's another kind of problem in it. And the transfer learning is an issue because it can only work out problems and predict problems that it's already seen based on the data it's already seen. So it doesn't transfer things across from one to the other. It also tends to have an issue regarding long pieces of text. So please watch out, all of you who are sticking DFE reports into generative AI models. It tends to read the beginning and the end. It's called the missing in the middle problem. It misses the middle sections because it reads the beginning, it reads the end. It'll tell you a bit about both of those, but it doesn't tend to read the middle bit. So there's a couple of kind of like few issues on that. Some of the ones that worry me are things like, probably say catastrophic forgetting for for models that are very specific. So you've got a maths model and you've trained it on all of maths and it goes into a school and it's teaching a whole bunch of kids algebra. And it's teaching algebra for 3 months because, that's our curriculum. But they tend to overwrite their information. So by the time it gets to, I've decided to teach, addition really well, or I've decided to teach English in the next semester, it's forgotten all of that because it's been trained on algebra for months. And then you've also got things like the distribution issues regarding kids. You've got like, say 1,000 kids, and then you've got like 1,000 points for them, 500 kids, 1,000 points. It's like, what, 123 data bits, 64 bits. What ends up happening is because the small data set and it's very overfitting, it reduces the dimension down to a very small amount. So all your kids who have got problems drop into one-dimensional point. And it's very small data. And you end up with this thing where you end up with spurious kind of insights, but they're not quite insights. Bright kids use Chrome. But why? Because one bright and gifted class use Chrome. With like really small dimensional data. So there's quite a lot of technical problems we've not quite dealt with yet. And
it's tough on a podcast to get through those, isn't it? Because I think probably using your detail and analogy, most of us listening have got a very limited set of tokens before it drops off the end. But you're right. The point is we shouldn't just see it as this singular term and it's safe to use, and it does, which is why good folks like yourself do the research for it.
I think so. And I think I've seen it and I've kind of like, I've not said much about, I've kind of grumbled a bit. But I've not said much about AI. And I thought, you know what, maybe I should actually write something more. I've got some in my thesis that I've wrote, but maybe I should write something more accessible for AI.
It's good to whet the appetite and people can reach out.
And I think there's some things in there, but that's not to say that there's not some benefits that we could get out of it. I'm pro tech, pro humanity, I'd say. I like tech to be for good. I think there's good uses in tech. I think we can get good things out of it. So it's not all doom and gloom. But I think we have to be very aware of some of the limitations of it. You know what I mean? So I think there's lots of kind of very fine detail that you only get in kind of, back end of engineering papers,
Well, Matt is head of humanity in our conversations. I know.
I'm sat here thinking, I'm a single token human, I think, because I follow what Kaz talks about all the time, but I'm not clever enough to follow the details by any stretch of imagination.
You say that, but I'm trying to get ways that I can explain.
No, but you are.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing about you, Kaz, is that you want it to be accessible to everyone, don't you?
Yeah.
you go out of your way to make it accessible to everyone. So if I
Yeah.
can just flip the conversation here, can you tell us about your work in Liverpool with Steve Rotherham and the Authority and
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
everything a lot more
I've been
accessible?
I've been the chair, the co-chair, and currently the practicing chair of the Liverpool City Region panel for the third year. I'm probably going to run forth and do chair this year if everybody will vote for me. But we tend to rotate it round a bit. So there's a panel of about 10. I'm hoping I should get 15 next week. We've just hired in more people. And we effectively look at all the policies in the Liverpool City region to check that they're accessible, from everything from transport to travel to how our trains are, to our healthcare, to our further lifelong learning, to our educate, everything. So
Brilliant.
all of the policies of the LCR come through the equality panels. There's several. There's the disabled one, which I'm co-chairing, and then there is the race panel, and then there's the women's panel and the intersection panel. And it's just to make sure that we have that kind of lived experience in asking questions, and also to make sure that all the policies that come through our region are truly accessible to everybody. And it was an important one. I got asked to do it. It was an important one that I felt to do for my region. It's, it's a big responsibility. It's like 1.6 million people that you're designing policy for. So you've really got to get it right. And the diversity of the panel really helps as well, because, we've got, I'm autistic ADHD with EDS. We've got wheelchair users. We've got blind users. We've got quite a range of people on our panel. And it's always interesting to get together when you get a policy, like, here's the strategic policy for funding. And everybody sits there and is like, well, how's this work? How's that going to work? Because you get to hear all the time all the kind of difficulty and challenges that are out there.
And it might seem a silly question though, but you're talking policy here. Are you then seeing that what you recommend following the policy reviews is then actually implemented? So that actually, so Steve Rotherham's quite ahead of the game, and
Yeah,
Liverpool.
Steve Rotherham's ace.
Yeah.
He's been absolutely excellent. I asked very early on for a restructure of all of our training regarding neurodiversity, and he absolutely came through. He's got nothing but good things to say about Steve.
He's the mayor of the greatest city in the world, isn't he? So,
well, in my view, I guess so. But I will point out. But he is, Steve's always on the ball. He's absolutely so. He's very much dedicated to the city being the most inclusive city that we can get. We've just started implementing becoming I'm trying to think here. We've just started implementing in the Liverpool City region the new Liverpool neurodiversity policies, which are going to be coming out. So that's pretty cool for the region there, with some of the Liverpool neurodiversity panel on. And we've just started the process of redesigning all of our buses now. So I was part of the bus redesign and part of the rail redesign, and all of our stations are being redesigned. And it's things like this that matter. And you think, oh, why would you do it in education? I made a point yesterday for neurodivergent and disabled kids. They're exhausted long before they get to our classrooms, and a lot of that is important, how they get to school, how they transport, how they travel, how they can get around the cities and be involved in their communities. You don't want them absolutely exhausted before you even get to the room. And a lot of the time they are, it's hard work. I found it hard work yesterday doing trains. And it's probably because I've spent so much time on our new trains up in the north that then when I got down south, I was like, oh, this is awful. We've got quiet rooms. So there's a lot of kind of intricate policy in there, but I'm just about to do our education and skills and lifelong learning policy. So that's going to be loads of fun because that's on my desk.
You are at heart an educator, and you got Teacher of the Year. But I mean, I know you love. We've been here a few times because I showed you. I showed the picture to the kids on Friday, and some kids said that's the Rocket Lady, and some kids said that's the Hot Lady because she did thermoforming with them. And I thought,
that's all right.
But I mean,
like
you're all about education as well, aren't you?
Yeah. I like to teach. I still do all the mainstay teaching for creating British aerospace. So I still get to go into classrooms all over the Northwest, all over the UK. I tend to do computing. I'll go in and do computing classes or teach robotic classes. I like to do the nice outreach, I've got to admit. And it's just because I try and get in like a classroom like once a month, twice a month now. Research is hard, but there's nothing quite like like running a classroom for a full day, you know, especially on a rainy Saturday with a bunch of grumpy year eights. It just reminds me. And sometimes I'm just like, I think because I'm very much in kind of development and policy and I'm in an engineering department at my university, sometimes I just need to get back out and feel like a teacher again. Do you know what I mean?
The foot on the ground, isn't it, really? But I mean, your MakerFest that you started MakerFest, didn't you, down
Yeah.
Warrington? And that's had 25,000 people attend. And
I think it's actually, we've never worked it out because we've not got much patience, but I was one of the founders of MakeFest in the Northwest region, and I ran with Dan Lynch OggCamp, the open source tech event we both did it for about a good 10 years. So I retired this year. I think I've earned my retirement of running it. But yeah, that we did, it was maybe 150, 200 makers, techie people, schools. You know, Pat Link came every year from Neston School to show off his 3D printed and forming, hands-on tech, open source tech, stuff you could see. And about 7,000 to 10,000 people attended every year.
Yeah.
Our outreach project over the 10 years, working out, our outreach project for Make a Difference in the Liverpool City region was about 30,000 children and families. So we did a year-long outreach.
And families as well, which is quite a big thing, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah. So we did outreaches, but we used it as a base for people to come and show off the kind of tech, but also for funding with the we did the guidance for digital media and sport in that, to how to set it up in other libraries in other cities, and also how to fund it, how to fund companies that would do things with education. So we funded a lot of early educational startups during that process as well. So that they could go out and they could do things with schools, you know. Little Sandbox did absolutely maker spaces in schools, kit for schools. So it was very much an educational thing, but it means it puts me in a weird two groups because I was a maker long before I was a teacher. So a lot of people know me either in the teaching sphere, or they know me in the making tech sphere, or they know me in the, you know, the disability sphere. They know me in one of the three. But I absolutely love doing MakeFest, but it is every year it is an intensive organizational skill. Thank you to everybody who ever helped me with that, because we had teams of people on that. But yeah, it's been a delight. It runs still now. You can go to other MakeFests. You can go to Manchester. You can go to Wirral's about to come up in a couple of days. So there's plenty of else.
I feel like we should have had 5 sessions with Kazal.
We could have 55.
Podcast on AI, podcast on PhD, podcast on MakerFest, podcast on STEAM.
Yeah, and many, many more. That's the Kaz factor. But there is one that maybe pulls it together, because you bring that quite unique perspective when you're looking at things. You're supporting when it comes to policy. You're looking at data and what's happening within education from an educator and from a neurodivergent perspective in terms of what's there. And so the question always is, do you see enough acknowledgement of that within the technology that you look at or within the practice used in schools? Because some of this is about, you know, we've had a number of podcasts, including today, where we've kind of identified that listening is the number one skill, and looking and learning. Yet we still seem to be guilty of saying there's the one size fits all and you'll have to adapt you in order to use it effectively.
Yeah, I feel like this is the one that I end up banging on a lot about. And
well, bang on, because it's something that needs.
There's loads of other things I could talk about, but I feel like this is the one that I do really go to town on. And I think it's because this one's the frighteningly critical bit that I think most tech firms and most education places absolutely miss. And I think that is my big worry with that. Because the way you design tech impacts the outcome at the end. And a lot of the time, teachers aren't necessarily involved in the design of tech. And a lot of the time, send is the afterthought of tech. You know, it's the one at the end that's not really there. I called it in my research recently. It's, you know, you see it as the accessibility paradox, even with the actual send tech. We have a poor understanding of special educational needs and disability, and we do poor training on it. And because we have a poor understanding and we do poor training on it and we've got poor tech, we end up in a situation where we think none of these things work. But the truth is that the tech isn't built often with send pupils in mind, let alone send involved. We talk about special educational needs as if these people never grow up. Do you know what I mean? So the amount of rooms I've been in where I've heard people have a full discussion about autism as if there's nobody autistic there. And it gets heartbreaking to be in those rooms, you know.
Do you
And
think it's refreshing though, in a different way? We were talking on a previous episode with Nick Ponsford, and one of the things that kind of is very obvious now is with the advent of technology and AI doing lots of the traditional kind of things that we might do for number crunching and analysis, employers are looking for the non-standard people who are creative, imaginative, good communication skills.
I think so.
And so aren't we shifting the dial to say, actually, we don't want conformity. We want diversity of perspectives and skills.
I think that's the strength. I think from when, you know, keep in mind, I had to get to the level where I'd won, several teaching awards before I felt comfortable telling everybody that I was autistic ADHD. That's the level I thought I had to be at before I could publicly be about it. And that was over, it's about a decade now ago. It was just after I got a test and I was like, right, nobody can take anything away from me now. I reckon I'm safe. In that time, at first I seen lots and lots of people email me up saying, I really wish I could tell somebody, but I'm not going to because I'm worried that they think I'm not competent. Head teachers, trust leads, classroom practitioners, policymakers. Do you know what I mean? Now I see people openly being talking about it. It's not as a lonely place as it was back then. Now there's much more people like, and every now and again I'm like, oh, okay, you newly got diagnosed, or you've just had this, or congratulations. I see that more, which is great because we need more openly disabled and neurodiverse teachers. And that's one of the things that I do find frustrating, because often when I go into classrooms and I go and teach for the day, quite often I'm like the first neurodivergent teacher they've ever met. Sometimes, they don't meet adults like me. So that's something that I'm really passionate we should have more of. So I do think the situation is changing. I don't think it's changing enough in the kind of technical parts. And I don't think it's changing enough with the tech itself. So, I still question tech firms, like, well, did you think about neurodivergent and SEND students in this? Did you look at the data for them? Did you ask them to come in? And I think that's an important feature that you should have as part of that. And it links really to the Equality Act. I've seen the DFE's AI generative guidance just recently, and I was like, oh, this is good. Somebody who knew what they were doing wrote this. And actually, it covers, these things that have got to be covered in the Equality Act. You can't just blanket treat people as if they're exactly the same when they're just not. But I think sometimes people forget how persistent that is every day. So like, it's weird. People kind of appreciate it, but then they don't realize that it's all the time. So like, and I think I put up a post a couple of days ago, like this is what it's like this every single day, every single moment of your life. You continuously come across the similar barriers over and over and over and over again. And I think that's the issue. People think of it as if it's like a thing that just is something we should address, but not realize that the kids and the people you see, that barrier is like continuously present in their life all the time. Even if it's not in your classrooms, even if you're accommodating it, when they get outside, it's still, for autistic, you might be giving them headphones in the class to concentrate. But when they go to a supermarket, when they go to a bus checkout, when they go to a train station, when they come back, they're constantly having to deal with that. And that's the issue, I think, that's difficult. I think to be disabled and neurodivergent means you live in a different world than other people. Other people can just go and do events. I said this online. Go and do an event. You want to come and do this event? Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. It takes me like 2 days to work out if I'm going to be able to do an event, and then I have to think about how I'm going to feel after the event. Have I got time to allocate to that event? Can I deal with the transport through to that event? Am I going to get overwhelmed when I'm at it? Am I going to get, have I got my headphones packed? Have I got everything that I need packed? Are my joints going to fall apart? Do you know what I mean? Have I done the physio this week? All of that has to be considered before I even go, yes, which means that our visibility is less. So, that's why when I was at BET recently, I was sat doing the women in EdTech mentoring, because we've been part of the BET 10 judges, and a disabled EdTech young woman came up to me. She was doing incredible work. And she said to me, can I ask, because I know you're one of the few who's public, how do you do it all? And it just broke me. I was like, very difficult is how you do it all. Do you know what I mean?
But you put yourself out there to make others feel comfortable asking the same questions.
Yeah.
That's the really important thing. It takes people with the courage and confidence to be open about those challenges.
It does. And I think over the years, I've become much more genuinely, authentically all-team neurodivergent. You'll see me now if I'm at conferences, if I find it too much, I just escape. I escaped your talk. I was like, the lights and the sound, I'm escaping your talk.
Just to clarify for listeners, not when I was speaking, she doesn't mean. She means the overall event. She didn't just leave because I opened my mouth.
No, I didn't just leave just because of you are. But I caught Al on the way past as I was kind of escaping. The lights were kind of getting to me. It was a bit full on. I'd been talking to everybody all morning and I said, I'm going to escape for a minute because I'm a bit, it's a bit full on. And I just went out, had a breather, took a moment, came back in later on, caught the end. It was great. But just doing those things is important for people to see me doing.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? So at first, I'd just suffer, just suffering things. And then over time, I've come to the position where I'm like, I need to be seen to not just suffering things. Do you know what I mean?
The role models, there's quite a few folks we've invited on who would fall in that category about allowing people to feel that, you know what, no one's judging if you need to step away from something for a moment. In fact, many of us would benefit from having the confidence to step away and gather our thoughts than just sit there and end up getting overwhelmed with information.
Yeah.
So I think some of the things we try and do on here is share different perspectives and ideas, but I think it's also to embrace the fact that there isn't one set rule about how we conduct ourselves. It's about what works, and as long as it's done in a constructive and as you always do, you kind of signpost it. I think hallelujah for Kaz Keeps of the world.
Thank you. Well, I'm trying to kind of signpost and at least just lead by example as you would do. Do you know what I mean? Because I know I've got quite big responsibilities of people, in the city region, in the, in various places to kind of do. So I'm trying to lead it at least with some authenticity and some
you're an absolute star in so many ways. I don't think it's said enough, is it? People like you, absolutely brilliant. Just putting yourself out there, what you do, when do you sleep?
I seem to recall from your research during the research period, there were days where you weren't.
No, I didn't. That's it. I remember when I was trying to talk to everybody, and keep in mind during my research, I spent hours and hours and hours talking to people, like hours. I've got like 200, 300 hours worth of data. And then I had to sit down and annotate each single part of everybody's conversation to get it right. I had a real duty to it. You'll read the front page of my dedication to people and realize how important this was me to get it right for people. And some days I'd be like, no, my hand hurts too much to do this anymore. Like, and I can't sleep because my hand's hurting because I'm busy annotating, and it's things like that. I audio dictated a whole bunch of my thesis because in the end it was like, you're 150,000 words and you've thought of every sentence, your hands start to go. Do you know what I mean? So it was a labour of love to do that one, but I think it does capture a lot of the truth of a lot of everybody. I was really delighted with mine that everybody trusted me with the anonymity that they gave me enough to be really honest. So it's not the glossy kind of version of things. It's the hard reality and the tough situations that teachers find themselves in. And one thing that comes through on mine when you do read it through, which, as I said, we're just organising my last Viva at the moment, so I'm literally in Viva prep, is how tough the situation is for teachers. It is a multitude of different demands all the time, and it's very much trying to do what is the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing to do. Now, I'll give you a quick example before I kind of round up. Matt talked about one, and he accidentally touched on one that I cover in mine a couple of days ago, and he talked about, are a lot of the ways that we're trying to control, tech for children working. Is it really working? I call it in mine what's called the illusion of control is what I call it, where we have this illusion that we are controlling and supervising and we're making tech safe for kids. But actually, it's not really providing the entire job that we think it is. It's letting us sleep, but it isn't really solving a lot of the issues that maybe are there. And that's something that we heard as well. I heard, Laura Knight talk about when she talked about the event that we were at. Same thing, touching on the same thing, but I heard it a fair bit in mine. That are we teaching them the kind of skills that they actually need? And if we are, whose responsibility is that? And that was a big one there. Whose responsibility is it? Is it the kids' responsibility? Is it the adults' responsibility? Is it the ed tech company's responsibility? I argue it's a joint responsibility, but it should have a defined people at the helm with it. Because when that responsibility is kind of shared among several, it's owned by no one. So,
I love the way you just said that, because it's about having the capacity to lead, having that person or that capacity that makes sure that all those stakeholders are upholding their bit of it, and often innocently, not necessarily intentionally, but without that. So I absolutely get that.
And I think that is a bigger problem for us. We've not really defined what our role is there.
No.
What is teachers' role there? Is it that person to lead everything, or do parents lead that? Do kids lead that? This idea that we can be like, this kid should be responsible for this behavior that they've done online, that they can't quite understand, and then they should feel bad about it, that we heard at Laura Knight, that can't be right. We can't be putting all of that on an 8-year-old, and I think we haven't, because we've just gone, oh, it's kind of shared. Teachers, parents, children, everybody sort of has a responsibility. Then nobody's ended up with a responsibility.
Amen to that. Caroline, we could go on for hours. Matt's point is right. Unfortunately, we've got another session in 5 minutes.
I think I was very good this time.
You've been
I think
fab.
I kept to the point.
What you have done is you've made it quite clear we need to invite you back for episode 2, 3, and 4.
5,
4. We are officially founding supporters of the Caroline Keep fan club. I think you're doing amazing stuff. So keep flying the flag.
Absolutely amazing.
Keep saying what you
commitment,
think.
Al, with everything else, just the sheer commitment of what you do, Kaz, off the chart, amazing.
I find it really weird when people are really nice about me. I don't know.
You don't like it.
She also gives really good hugs. So there you go. There's another one we'll add to the list.
Thanks, guys.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us. And those listening, rest assured, she'll be back soon for another episode. So thank you again.